Hi, this is Robin, and in this workshop, we're going to be creating a glowing fine art black and white effect in Photoshop. We're starting with a full color landscape photo, and then by the end of this tutorial, you'll be able to turn an ordinary color landscape into a glowing fine art black and white image with rich blacks and a soft atmospheric glow. Now, I've found that this effect works especially well with misty landscapes and seascapes with foamy water, also with sunsets and moonlit and backlit scenes, with silhouettes, with snowy landscapes, and also with dramatic overcast skies. But actually, you can use the same workflow for portraits, architecture, wildlife, and many other subjects. So here are some examples of the look right here. You'll notice that there is a combination of soft, glowing highlights. There's very deep blacks and very distinct tonal separation. Okay, so that's what we're looking for with this effect. That's essentially what gives these images their dreamy, fine art feel without looking flat or washed out. So rather than relying on a one-click infrared glow type of preset, I'm going to show you an editable workflow that lets you control each stage of the effect and then adjust it to fit your images. So let's jump into Photoshop. So this is the demo and the Photoshop workflow that we're going to go through on how to create a glowing black and white photo effect. I want to point out that this is a stock photo from Magnific, or Magnific, however you like to pronounce it. I believe the title is Fog Rising in a U.S. National Park. If I am allowed to, I will post the link to this in the description below the video in case you want to try the steps with this same image. So I've got the image open as a background layer in my layers panel. My properties panel is down at the bottom, and you can see my toolbar is docked right. So the first step, duplicate that background layer. You can left click and drag it to the bottom of the layers panel to that add new layer icon, the box with the plus, to get a copy, or on that background layer, do a Control or Command J to jump up a copy. Either way, it works the same. So the first step we'll do is to convert this color image to black and white. To do that, we're going to use the gradient map adjustment layer. So bottom of the layers panel, add new adjustment layer icon, which is the circle with the line, left click, and come down to where it says gradient map, which is in this section here. So it's right there. Left click, and now we have a new gradient map adjustment layer added. And you can see, because our color picker was black foreground, white background, it has already converted the image immediately to a black and white. But I want to do some tweaks, and you probably will want to also. So first thing I want to look at is in the properties panel associated with that layer. Just click that there. First of all, you'll see that here's the gradient. It goes from black to white. And I want to use a different method. I don't want to use smooth. So I'm going to click on this little down arrow, and I am going to use the classic. Look, and you can see by doing that. So let me just watch the image. You'll see it changes. So here's smooth, and here is classic. So I want to work with the classic method for conversion. All right. So the next thing is we want to get the gradient out into the gradient editor so we can work with it. So just left click once on this gradient, and we get the gradient editor. And want to just come down to the gradient all the way down here at the bottom. And we're going to work with these color stops on this gradient. So what I first want to do is I'm going to want to add some more white and brightness to this scene so we can get that glowy sort of look. So I'm going to start with this white stop handle here and start pulling it towards the left. And again, I am just doing this to my taste. I do it a little bit and then release. You do whatever you like and whatever balance of lights and darks you want for your image. You'll see it should be adding more whites into the image as I do this. I don't want to blow things out, blow the highlights too much. So I'll just stop there because I can always tweak it. So next I'm going to work with the midtones. And again, we got this teeny tiny little diamond here to work with. So then I want to keep pushing more whites into, or brighten up some of the midtones. So I'm going to pull that to the left. So I'm pulling more white into the scene. And you just have to do this to your taste. It's trial and error. There's no formula. And I think I'll stop there. And I might just put a little bit more richness back in the blacks. So then I'll grab the black color stop and pull it to the right to bring more blacks into the scene. I'll just keep it subtle. I don't want to make it too dark and lose the details. Okay, so once you get yours set the way you like, then you would hit the OK up here at the top. See where my highlighter is of the gradient editor dialog box to accept that. And so now that is back on this layer and what's represented. So this is the gradient map, black and white version. Okay, so my goal in this first step, besides converting it from color to black and white, is to create the foundation for the glowing effect that we're going to be going for here. So I am intentionally pushing the contrast farther than normal because we want deep blacks, highly defined micro contrast, and but yet I don't want to totally crush or lose the details in the midtones because the glow that will add will soften the details. So I want to keep a good balance that we can work from as a base here in black and white. By doing this and adding some of this contrast, it gives us room to soften the image later without losing depth or edge definition to the details in the seam. So what we're really aiming for is a balance of crisp detail and soft glow. Okay, so now having done this and being on an adjustment layer, I want to create what's sort of a new base layer to work from for the glow effect. So I'm going to add a stamp layer. To do that, I'm going to come to the bottom of the layers panel, add a new empty layer. The box with the plus is the add new layer icon. You don't have to really do that, but I like to do it because then I can see it fill. And then we're going to do what they call the claw maneuver. Simultaneously press and hold Shift, Control or Command, Alt or Option and E, and then we get that stamp layer. So it's a composite or a merge of everything that has come before. Now, just so we don't lose that if we have to go backwards, I'm going to make a duplicate of this first. So I'll just do a Control or Command J to jump up a copy of that. And then I am going to convert this layer to a smart object in case we want to make modifications to the adjustments we'll make next. So to do that, we'll go over into this area here, right click in that empty area, come down to where it says convert to smart object and left click. And you'll see right there, it's added a little icon in the lower right corner, and that tells you that now this is a smart object that we can modify without starting all over again if we want to. Okay, so that was all what I consider part of step one, is getting it from the color to the black and white and creating that base layer. The second step is adding a Gaussian blur. So we want to go to the top of the interface to the filter menu, come down to blur, right about there, come over and fly out and come down to Gaussian blur. So again, it's filter, blur, Gaussian blur, left click, and we have the Gaussian blur dialog box that comes up here. Now, what we want to do is, so this is quasi formula-ish. So you want to aim for a radius. Here, see, is the radius in the blur is how much blur you want. So it's either less blur or more blur, okay? So you want to aim for a radius that is somewhere in the 20 to 50 pixel range. So set it to your personal taste. You can experiment because it can vary from image to image. Just set the level that you like for your image. So I'm going to start pulling this to the right to stay in that 20 to 50 range. And I want to get some softness to this so it looks more glowy. So that's actually not bad. Yeah, I'm getting a little bit too much there, so I think I'll go back. I kind of like the mid-30s. All right, it seems to want to stop at 36, so I'll stop there. And by the way, I have preview checked on so I can see what's happening. Once you get a nice soft blur in there, then you click OK. All right, so now we've got the, oops, Gaussian blur added to the black and white. All right, so now what you want to do is add a blend mode. There's several options of blend modes that you can use. I tend to like to use screen because I think it looks dreamier for the soft glowy look. So right here in this box where it says normal, that's where the blend modes are. So come across to that down arrow and click on it to reveal them. And you can just mouse over them and see what the different effects are. Okay, so here is screen. So you can see how glowy and dreamy that gets. Another option that works in this effect is soft light. So you can see that's definitely more contrasty and more detail. And then lighten, I think, also tends to work. So you kind of just have to go with the look that you're going for and what your preference is. But I think for mine, I'll stick with screen for now. So I'll left click on that. And you can see it's gotten very intense here. Now, what I want to do and what you'll want to do is to only apply this effect to the highlights for a hazy effect. So to do that, we're going to come up here over to this right-hand panel and come over one, at least for how mine is set up, from layers to the channels tab. And I'll click on the channels tab. If you do not have a channels tab open here in your interface, come over to the top of the interface to the window menu and just come down and click to be sure there's a check mark in front of channels. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to press and hold either Control or Command. So I'm on a PC, so I'll do Control or Command, plus click on the RGB channel. So Control or Command, hold, click on that RGB. And you can see what that has done is it has created a whole set of marching ants here that are selecting the highlights in your image. Now, optionally, you can refine that even more and just do only the brightest highlights. And what you would do is, while you're still here, press and hold Alt or Option plus Control or Command plus Shift, and then click on that RGB channel, and that'll narrow this selection even more to only the brightest highlights. I'm not going to do that for my image, but just so you know if you want to experiment with it. All right, so while this marching ant selection is still active, let's go back to the layers stack and the layers tab. Left click here. All right, and while we are on this Gaussian blur layer and it's highlighted, I want to add a mask that represents this selection. Bottom of the layers panel, click on that box with the circle, which is add a layer mask, and it has added the mask that represents what the highlights were that were selected. So these are the highlights that are going to be used for this glowy effect. And you can see it has pulled it in from how it was affecting the whole image. All right, now optionally, you can also, if this is still a bit much for you, reduce the opacity to your taste. So the opacity would be controlled just to the right of that blend mode right there. So you can either click on that down arrow and pull a slider, or left click on the word opacity and just pull it to the left to taste, like a scrubby kind of a device. Again, I'll just keep releasing till I see what I want for mine. Now you can see as I control the opacity how much, right? I'll just go to extremes so you can see there. I definitely don't want to lose the haze. And especially for the video, I might leave it a little stronger. Okay, so for mine, I'll have it on the screen blend mode and 45% on that Gaussian blur layer. Okay, so now one thing I'd like to mention, just take a little brief interlude here. Before we move on to the final step, if you're enjoying this tutorial, if you're learning something from it, I'd really appreciate it if you'd subscribe to my PhotoMaker Academy channel by clicking the subscribe button and the black bell icon below the video. It's free to subscribe. There's no need to click again if you've subscribed already. I publish Photoshop tutorials that are project-oriented like this one and focus on developing creative photo effects. So subscribing really helps YouTube know that these videos are worth recommending to other photographers. Okay, so I've covered that. So let's move on to finish building the glow effect by adding one last layer of depth and atmosphere. So again, I'm going to add a stamp layer first. So bottom the layers panel, add new layer icon, the box with the plus to get the empty layer, and we're going to do that claw maneuver again. So Shift, Controller, Command, Alt, Option, and E all at the same time, and we've got that there. So now the first thing I want to do before I do anything else is again convert this to a smart object in case we want to make modifications. So over in the empty area, right click, convert to smart object. Wait till that little icon shows up to show you that it's a smart object. And then for the third and final step here, well, it's close to final. The third step, let's go to the filter menu, so top of the interface, and come down to the camera raw filter, left click on that. We go into the camera raw interface here. We're going to start in the effects panel, and sometimes it takes a while for this system to catch up with the highlighter, or it may not come back at all, so just sort of watch where my little cursor is here on the right. So I am in the effects panel, and I'm going to start with the dehaze slider and add a negative dehaze. Okay, so I'm going to pull that to the left. To the right is dehaze, to the left is add haze. And again, I just watched the image. There we go. The highlighter came back again. So I don't want to go too, so let me just show you. You can add a lot of haze to this if you want to. So let's do it to the level that you want. Right, I think that's enough extra haze. So we're going to do that to introduce more of a soft, smoky atmosphere. I think it helps the highlights bloom into the surrounding areas and creates more of a soft atmospheric glow versus just relying on that Gaussian blur. Okay, while we're still here in the effects panel on the right, next I'm going to add some negative clarity. So here's clarity right above dehaze. And again, clarity to the right would make things sharper and crisper, and to the left is less crisp. So again, I'm not going to probably do as much as the dehaze, but I'll pull that a little to the left just to soften things up for this glowing look. And again, this is not a formula. Do it to taste. That's probably a little bit much. Right, I'll leave mine there. So again, the idea here in the clarity slider is to take down the digital edge sharpness just a touch on the midtones. So with the tones down, the digital sharpness moves the image more towards looking like a classic fine art print kind of feel. So that's what we're going for in this whole effect or look. Okay, so next we'll move up to the light panel right above here. And again, just going to work with one slider. We're going to work with the contrast slider. So usually you would do the opposite with contrast that you do to these. So since these I moved negative, this I'm going to move positive, all right? And so to counteract it there. So not a lot, just a bit. Again, I move it a little and I stop and look, and then I adjust. Yeah, now that gets too crispy when I look at some of the details, so I think I'm going to stay somewhere between 10 and 15 based on what I just saw. All right, I'll stay at 13. So again, as I said, we're counteracting the flattening of the dynamic range that we did by using the negative dehaze and clarity, and we're bumping the contrast a little bit to force the blacks in the scene back down. So we want to crush them a little better, and we want to drive the whites up for more punch. So once you get yours the way you like, you come to the bottom of this panel down here at the lower right and click OK to accept those alterations. Okay, and now that layer is back here at the top of the layer stack. So now the final and fourth step is I want to copy this mask that we made back here on the blur layer where we were focusing on just the highlights back up to this layer too. So the same thing happens. It's really focusing that extra dimensional brightening and glowing depth only into the highlights. So to copy that, we'll click on that mask, left click, and then use Alt or Option. So you don't have to recreate that mask all over again. You can copy it and move it. So Alt or Option, left click, and drag it up and release. And so now that Adobe Camera Raw glow, I'll call that. Glow Plus, how's that? That was adding to the original glow, is added just to the highlights. So again, the point of doing that extra Camera Raw filter step is that it added some secondary texturized glow to the prior results from the Gaussian blur. It was intended to keep the deep shadows from these underlying layers in the stack, and it's intended to try to keep some tonal separation for a really good fine art black and white sort of look. And that's it. It's just those 4 steps. That is the end of the demo. So here is the finished image. And we can see that we started from a full color landscape. So let me show you what we went from and to. So before, after, okay? And we built this glowing fine art black and white photograph using just a handful of Photoshop techniques. They're all completely editable. The thing that I like and think that's nice about this workflow is that every major step can be adjusted to your own image for a more dramatic fine art interpretation. So if you enjoyed this tutorial, again, I'd appreciate it if you'd like it on the page and subscribe to my PhotoMaker Academy channel. Plus, again, click that black notification bell in order to get alerts to my future Photoshop workshops. Take care.